Hello, I'm Andy Sharp. So today I thought I'd look back at some of my first ever leatherworking projects and try and go through some things that I've learnt from them. This actually was an idea that a viewer gave me, Sam Johnston. Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether you're the Sam Johnston I know from uni or not. If you're a different one, cool. If you're the uni one, hello. But yeah, this basically was a good idea. I thought that because it was interesting for me personally to actually have a look back at the things that I've created a while ago and kind of analyse them, figure out what I've learnt from them. I think it's really great to have a bit of a reflective attitude when it comes to hobbies and leatherwork and life generally, to be fair. But yeah, so I'm going to go over a belt, the first ever leatherworking project I made, as well as the second, which was a wallet, and I'll tell you what I've learnt from making each of those projects. So this is the first ever leatherworking project I made. It was a natural veg tan belt. I've cut in some footage here of the belt next to some leather of the same colour that it was originally, so you can really see how it's darkened. It's got nickel plated hardware on it, so that was just because I liked nickel plating at that point. So the first thing I learnt about this belt is that I like leatherworking, essentially. This was the first ever project I made, as I've said, and the reason I made it was that I was in the market for a belt that was a higher quality. Before that, I'd been using a £3 Primark jobby that fell apart predictably, and I thought, right, I'd better invest in something good quality so that I won't have to replace it nearly as often. And so I did, and looked online, and came to the conclusion that, okay, you can make one actually for yourself for the same price or less as buying a high quality one yourself. So I thought, well, that's a project, I like a project, let's go for it. And what it did is got me hooked on leatherwork, and now 4 years later, I make a little bit of money off it. Not enough, but to do any, I don't make any money really in comparison, but I make enough to sort of support the hobby, and so I'm not actually losing money now by doing the hobby, which is nice. And I've made God knows how many projects for other people, and yeah, it's been fantastic. The second thing I learned from making this belt is that I really like the way veg tan leather ages. So you've seen from the earlier shots the colour differences, and it's a kind of nice rich brown, but what I like about it is that it's not uniform. It's not a uniform brown. It's got all sorts of, obviously at the moment it's covered in paint, that's my fault, but it's got all sorts of little darker patches and scars. There's a black bit where I had a belt clip. I was working for a gardener the summer after I made this, and I had a belt clip with some secateurs in it, and that's sort of a mark that's shows that that was that. It's got darker bits. It's been through a hell of a lot, this belt actually. It kind of tells a story. It's got fake blood stains on it from a show I did with a comedy society I'm part of. It's darker where it's been exposed to more kind of sweat and wear and sun. And yeah, I think I realised that I really like natural veg tan as a material, and that's why I now use a fair amount of it. However, in some ways this belt, as you can probably see, has not aged fantastically. The reason being is that I think the leather I used was too thin. It's about 2mm thick, 2.5mm, and as a result has it's sort of bent and it's creased. And I think, to be honest, now I wouldn't go anything under 3mm for a belt, probably. I mean, most of the stuff I've used, like this Metropolitan stuff's like 4mm at least. I've got a belt on at the moment made of J&FJ Baker leather, and that's like 5mm, I think. So yeah, that was kind of what I've learned from this, that I would go for thicker leather for a belt for longevity and strength. So you'll probably see as well, a second point that I've learned from this is about hardware. The nickel plating on this is coming off, and this is basically the reason why I don't like plated hardware, because however good it is, it's not going to be that forever. And I don't think this was a particularly high quality belt. It was some cheap one from eBay. But yeah, it's not good, and it's not been a good experience. Part of me wants to replace this nickel hardware with solid brass, so it'll all look a bit better. But then that wouldn't be the same belt. It's like the whole brush argument. If it's had, this is the same brush I've had since 1974. It's only had 10 new handles and 3 new heads. Well, it ain't the same brush, is it? So I don't really want to change anything about it. It's been this unit for 4 years, and it will stay like this until I get thoroughly fed up with this buckle, I think. So there are a couple of other things I've learned from this, mainly kind of preferences of how I like to construct things. So obviously the burnishing on this belt is not very good. It was my first attempt at it. Was using gum Dragosanth at the time, and I did for ages, but now I'm a token old man because I think I just get better results for myself. So obviously that has improved in my future work. And in addition, you can see that I've used 2 pieces of hardware to fix this. So 2 Chicago screws. And what I've decided is that while this has done a perfectly good job of holding it together, I prefer the look of 3, and I think it gives slightly less flex in the buckle area here, if you have 3 to give it a bit more rigidity. That's not scientific in any way. I've put some footage here to see how they look side by side. I apologise for the corrosion. I was playing around with some water, trying to fiddle about with this belt, and the brass has sort of corroded horribly as a result. It's not what I'm selling, don't worry. But yeah, that's what I've decided, that I prefer that. So the second project I'd like to show you is this wallet. It's I used natural veg tan, the same as the first belt, only this time I used some really thin veg tan goat leather. I thought, I can't use really thick leather, so I went a bit too thin, really. Some people, obviously this goat leather is perfectly fine for wallet interiors. Some people swear by this stuff. But for me, I think I prefer a slightly more coarse, thick leather. And of course, what a lot of people do is use a thin leather for the interior and a thick leather for the outside of the wallet. And this is what I did in my future wallets that I've made for myself, that I've been assembling from various scraps of things. And yeah, that's a perfectly valid thing to do, but at this point I didn't, and everything is very, very floppy as a result. So I learned a huge amount from making this wallet. It was the first time I'd sewn leather. I was using a very cheap overstitch wheel and an awl. I've since learnt that I prefer using stitching punches and wing dividers to get a nice line from the edge of the leather. That's just personal preference, but it was something that I kind of started learning on this because I didn't particularly like the way of using an awl. And in addition, I learned a lot about thread choice. So for what this is, Wenzel thread. This is used in here. Linen thread, which fantastic for some people, but I learned that I prefer polyester because of the way you can melt it and kind of hide it a bit more easily. Versus linen thread, obviously it's not going to melt; it's going to burn. So you can't apply heat to it like that. That's just a personal preference thing, but I also learned a huge amount about pattern making from this, actually, because this, believe it or not, is totally my own design. I've done basically no pattern making since, which is a bit of a shame, but I don't particularly enjoy the process. And I do actually still use parts of this design. The reason I did it my way is that a lot of the patterns I found online were for American currency, and British currency is a slightly different shape. It's shorter in terms of the length of the note, and the notes are thicker. So I thought, well, I want this to be able to hold English currency and not stick out at the top. So I designed a wallet and I still use some of these dimensions myself for current wallets that I've been making. So yeah, in some ways, there's a bit of this wallet in everything I've made since. Although, of course, in other ways, I've taken inspiration from different patterns. I use at the moment a lot of quarter leather patterns for kind of some things, so they're particularly pockets and that kind of thing, and spacings. I find the quarter leather stuff is a fantastic place to start. And of course, if you buy a pattern, you can always cannibalize bits of it and use it in a different way. So I use pockets from a passport wallet in ordinary wallets. I use some of the vertical stuff in different configurations. So you buy some patterns, design some yourself, and play around and figure out what you like to use. The last little thing I learned from this is that while some people love the patina of a natural wallet aging, I don't like it nearly as much as I like belts, because I find this ended up bluish from the inside of my trousers, jeans, not just because I don't have blue skin, but I was wearing jeans, and I don't know, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of it, but horses for courses, it's got a place, and some people love it. You try it out for yourself, see what you can do. To kind of sum it up, I reckon that a reflective attitude is a good thing to develop if you're starting leatherwork or any other hobby, to be honest, because I think having a fair appraisal of your work is a great thing. Don't be too hard on yourself and think, oh, this is horrible, I'm never going to be good at this, because that's going to discourage you from carrying on. However, don't think, yes, I've made this perfectly, and not analyse it further, because that's going to cause you to basically just stagnate, and you'll never get better than that. So yeah, try. I don't know. I find that a reflective attitude of kind of fair looking at it and thinking, well, I could have done that better, but that bit was good. That really helps, I think, for the development of my leatherwork, certainly. And the second thing really is that early projects can have a fantastic amount of learning potential. It looks objectively awful, this wallet, I think. And yet it's taught me a huge amount. I still use bits of the pattern of it. I learnt a lot about stitching preference, thread preference, methods, dimensions, cutting. I learnt a huge amount, and you can't. I don't think that can be overstated. Really, the power that something awful can teach you. They always say that you learn far more from your mistakes than your successes, and I think that's definitely true in leatherwork. So thank you again to Sam Johnston for the idea. I hope I've done it justice. I probably haven't, but you don't come to this channel for quality, clearly. Yeah, I hope it's been useful, probably not useful, but at least interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.